Now, have you ever had the experience of reading, studying a passage in the Bible, and then maybe a year, 3 years later, you went back over that passage, and the second time, it was more meaningful. It really hit you. You ever had that experience? Let me see your hand. Let me see your hand if you've had that experience. Yeah, and that's because I think the Bible is alive. It's inexhaustible. No matter how much gold we dig out of the scripture, there's always far more gold left. And not only that, sometimes the situations in your life change so that maybe that passage you studied a year ago is more meaningful and pointed, dealing with your situation that has arisen since the first time. So I think maybe at some point in the past I went over this passage with you, but I want to do it again. And there's a reason I want to do it again with you. So let's look at these 4 verses from Zachariah chapter 8. Now, earlier in chapter 8, and I didn't give you these verses, God tells his people, your forefathers were very disobedient to me. And they didn't walk with me. They disobeyed me. And as a result, they were a detriment to other nations. I chose you all as my people to be a light to the world, to tell people about me, to tell people how to be saved. You've done everything but that. And as a result, the nations cursed you Jewish people, because you were so detrimental, harmful to people. Rather than helping people, you made them stumble. And so I determined to punish my people Israel, and I did so. Now God is saying, however, I have also determined to bless you people and eventually make you what I wanted you to be, a light to the world. So instead of hurting people, you're going to be a blessing to help the nations. All right? Now that's what God says to them earlier in Zechariah 8. So let's pick this up now with verse 20. Here is a result of what's going to happen when God turns Israel back to himself, when they become obedient to God. If I understand the Bible correctly, God chose Israel to be a light, to help Gentiles know him. Israel started out doing that, and then they got further and further away from God. And when their Messiah showed up, they didn't recognize him. They thought he was blasphemous, and they crucified him. And then he went back to heaven. And they are in spiritual blindness today. But God's not finished with Israel. Remember the principle is stated in Philippians 1:6, he who began a good work in you will, what's the word? Finish it. So God began a good work with the Jews. It's just that they're out to lunch spiritually right now. They're blind as a bat. Oh, you got some who see, like Rick and Marcia Moskovitz. And I've had some students at Moody who are just pure Jews. But they've been converted to the Messiah. They're genuine Christians. But the majority of Jewish people are not. But God's not finished with them. If I understand Scripture correctly, Israel is going to become a Christian nation. God's determined. He started good work with them, and he will finish that good work with them. So verse 20 now, here is a result of what the Jews are going to be like when God finishes his work, when he puts them back on the right path. The Lord Almighty declares the following: it will yet happen. Let's stop right there and think about that. If the Almighty says something is going to happen, what are the chances do you think that it's going to happen? 100%. That's it, 100%. Now we have 4 verses. I want you to know this expression, the Lord Almighty, appears in every verse. So the emphasis is who is predicting all of this. It's not me, it's not you, it's not Billy Graham, it's none other than the Lord Almighty. He's telling us what I'm saying here is going to happen. Well, he's got the power, the strength, the authority to make it happen. And so what's going to happen? I'm in the second line. That peoples, now he's talking about Jewish peoples, will come. That's kind of general. Be more specific. That is, the residents of many cities, Jewish cities. Now what's going to happen? Note in verse 21. The growing momentum. And the residents of one city will go to another city, urging, let us by all means go to entreat the Lord's favor and seek the Lord Almighty. Oh, what an amazing thing. Dave Huff, did you enjoy his sermon Sunday? Yes. Wasn't that wonderful? Well, after lunch, he wanted to come back here in the pastor's office and talk. So we came back here. And I knew a little bit of this. He was my student in Virginia. And Dave told me about his spiritual awakening down in Florida when he was 17 years old or 18 years old. He said, man, Christ came into my life and I just caught fire for Jesus. I was a burning torch for the Lord. I was so enthusiastic. And so after high school, I eagerly went to Bible college. I wanted to be a pastor and convert the whole world to Christ. I was just in love with Jesus. I wanted everybody to be saved. So he got married, and at 22, he said, that's it. I'm finished Bible college. My wife and I packed a trailer, and we're off to somewhere to start a church. And so he went somewhere, and there was an elder pastor who said, son, you're 22. You don't know anything about starting the church. Stay here. Let me teach you and train you of how to start a church and run a church. And so Dave did. That man mentored him, and then the pastor died, and the congregation called Dave to be their pastor. But he said, I was so on fire for Jesus. That's all I want to do, was walk with him and preach the word and lead people to Christ. Well, Christ came into his life and set his life on fire, and that's what's going to happen here. Where the Jews are urging one another, let's by all means go to entreat the Lord's favor and seek the Lord Almighty. Would that be wonderful if our fellow American citizens had that attitude? Let's go seek God's favor. Now, how many folks are going to do this? Well, according to verse 22, not just Jews, it's going to spread. Gentiles will do it. Thus many peoples and powerful nations. Okay, so now we're not just talking about Jews from Israel. Many people from powerful nations will come to seek the Lord Almighty and to entreat his favor. Now, verse 23, the pious Jew becomes a blessing and a disciple to others. The Lord Almighty declares the following. Now, who's saying this? The Almighty. God's saying, I'm not just talking. I am going to make this happen. You can count on it. In those days, when 10 men from various nations, so now we're talking about 10 Gentiles, from various nations and languages will grasp, yes, they will actually grasp the edge of a Jewish man's robe, requesting, may we walk with you? Why? Because we have heard that the Lord is with you. Now, I want you to look at the back at some applications. Number one, when God bestows advantages, benefits, blessings, and good things and privileges on you, many people will recognize it. Not everybody. There are people still out there that are blind as a bat. And you may be blessed amazingly, but they don't see that. But there'll be others, saved and unsaved, who do see God blessing you. Two, when you have a healthy, growing relationship with Christ, rivers of living water are flowing out of you. And what is that? Life in the Spirit. People see your joy, your peace, your love to other people, your moral righteousness, and they like what they see. It's winsome to them. And not only do you attract them, some of these people begin to want what they see coming out of you. Ed Goodrich was a real well-known Greek teacher at Multnomah School of the Bible in Portland, Oregon. And I asked him, how were you saved? He said, I was a sailor in World War II. I was on a ship, and there was a Christian sailor on there. And he said, I didn't know he was a Christian. I was spiritually dead, but I just watched him. And I noticed he was so different from the other sailors. And one day I was looking at him with his back turned to me, and I said, I don't know what that man's got, but I want what he's got. And one day he approached Ed and said, what makes you so different? He said, Jesus Christ. He said, Ed, would you like Jesus to do for you what he's done for me? And Ed said, yeah, but I don't know how. And right there, the man took out his Bible and led me to Christ. So rivers of living water flow out of us, and it just washes over other people. And boy, you got their attention. They like what they see, that love, that joy, that peace, contentment coming out of you. They want it themselves, but they don't know how to go about it. And that's where you come in. You can lead them to Christ. I want to finish number 2. I'm in the third line. Many people will be attracted to your new, different life, and they want it for themselves. 3. These people who observe your character and conduct realize that you have something good they don't have. I remember a student at the University of North Carolina in Chapel Hill. Some Christian worker was on campus, and he was on campus preaching up a storm, had a big group of students around him, about 100, and this student who wrote a testimony said, as I was listening to that man preach, I knew he had something I didn't, and I badly wanted whatever that man had. That's amazing. The first time he was confronted listening to him preach, he's got something I don't have, but whatever he's got, I want it. Number 4, some of these observers will seek to get close to you, asking for your time, requesting your help, so to speak. They're going to grab you by the robe. They want to learn from you. They will do all of this so they too can be blessed by God. They know you got some connection with God. Something good's going on in your life. They're getting from Him. So could I spend some time with you? Can I grab you by the robe? I see God blessing you. I'd like to know how God can bless me too. 5, when others get close to us, we must not make them disciples of us, but keep pointing them to Christ so they can become followers of Him, not us. 6, remember Christ calls us to be servants. So let some of these people get close to you. Spend some time with them if you possibly can do that. 7, as Gentiles will flock to holy Jerusalem in the future, we want people to come to Brentford Bible Church. What will stimulate them to do this? Well, some people have told me they go back and forth out here on the street from time to time. And they say, I've been noticing that church, and and the thought came to me, maybe one of these Sundays I ought to just go there. And so there have been some people here like Norman and I think a young Gil. They just passed by out here. That young Kedia, is that her name? The young black woman from Haiti who is a nurse. Well, she told me the same thing. She said, I've been away from God. Jesus has been wooing me back to Himself. I've seen this church, and I thought, well, maybe I ought to just, I'm not going to church, maybe I ought to just check this church out. But so what's going to make people come? Well, it's not just passing by the church. Quite often, what's going to motivate them to come here is what they see in you. What they see in you and me. No, years ago, I had a student at Moody. He graduated and he moved to California, and that's where he's living and working now. And about a month ago, he asked me, he said, I'm going to be in Chicago, and I'd like to have breakfast with you. And he's talking about this past Saturday at a restaurant down in downtown Wheaton where I lived. He said, would you meet me there at 8 o'clock? So this past Saturday, I met him there. And so when we sat down in the booth after we ordered our breakfast, first question I asked him, you still living in California? Yes. Well, what brings you to Chicago? He surprised me. he said, Moody Bible Institute has created a new position, and they hired me to fill it. And what's more, I'm here to ask you to sign a contract and come work for me down at Moody. And I said, doing what? And he said, I want you to be the president of Moody. No, I'm just kidding. I've told the last two presidents, I wouldn't have your job for all the tea in China. You got all these problems to worry about. As a teacher, I just have to be concerned about two things: a piece of chalk in my hand and a class of students. That's all I focused on at Moody: a piece of chalk and a class of students. I don't want to do any more than that. So I said, well, what is your job? What are you going to be doing? And he said, Moody has created a new position, and they want to make devotions. We want to make podcasts, and we want to send them to all the Moody radio affiliates and spread it all over America. And what else did he say? Oh, what was the other thing? We want to make videos and put them on YouTube so it goes all over the world. Now, one of the things that Sue and I have been praying for in the last 2 years is Colossians 4, where Paul said, now he's in jail. Lord, please open a door for us for the word. And what he meant by open the door is A, the door of my jail cell so I can get out and be a free man again, but also open the door to my fellow inmates here, prisoners, so I can preach the gospel to them. Please open a door, opportunity. That's what he means by door. Please open an opportunity. Give us more opportunities for the word, not for ourselves, for your word. And then I like the way he puts it in, I think Colossians, where he says, grant us logos. Grant us the opportunity to speak the mystery of Christ. I like that. Grant us an opportunity to speak. And so I said, well, what's entailed in this? He said, I know you've got your own website on YouTube, and you can keep that. Keep doing what you're doing. He said, I've been watching your videos. They're very helpful. But what you're doing there is a bit more academic than what we want at Moody. So what we want at Moody are 90-second devotions, 15-minute devotions, a whole hour that will be structured by us, where people listen and then they don't call in on a telephone. We have another program that does that. But when they listen to your devotions, they can send you, as you're there giving the devotion, they can text you, email you questions, comments, and we'll hand them to you, and you can answer the questions, you can respond to their comments. And I said, well, how much time is going to be required? And he said, we would ask you to give us 2 hours, one day, 2 hours, just on one day every 2 weeks. Okay, that's pretty reasonable. And so that wouldn't take away from my own website. He said, we want to be totally practical, whereas on your website, you're very practical, but you're a bit academic, where you take Hebrew and Greek passages and go through them. But on this, no Hebrew and Greek, you just give us devotions from the English Bible, purely practical. That's what the listening audience is listening for. And so I told him, okay, I've got to bring my wife into this. Sean, the three of us need to talk to you. And then I said, would I have a contract with Moody? He said, oh yeah, you'd have to sign a contract and you'd have to negotiate that with them. And so we will. And he said, look, if you want to, you can come down to Moody and use their studio all set up, or we're willing to send workers to your house and build a studio in one of your rooms there. We'll pay for everything. You can have your own studio. So anyway, I mentioned that to you because I would appreciate your praying for me and Sue, whether or not we go forward with this. But it's a wonderful opportunity to preach, teach God's word all over America, maybe all over the world. and do it at Moody's expense to do that. Okay, so let's take, I'm willing to take up to 5 minutes for any questions or comments on what's been said on the devotion here.